Hey, folks, man, this is Monk, and we are back with another episode of Classics of Cinematics. And this is the show where we talk about the films that shaped and warped our childhood film-going experiences. And I'm joined, as always, with my co-host. We got Bobby Blockbuster.
Yo, yo, yo.
And today we got a guest. We got Goro from the Talk Without Rhythm podcast.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. I feel like you kind of do what we do in a way, except it's just not limited to the classic films. You do a lot of, more modern stuff and things as you see them and things that your audience requests.
Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest thing with doing the show is that I didn't want to limit myself to any one type of genre. I didn't want to limit myself to any one time. I'm a movie fan. So I want to try to cast as wide a net as possible. So that ends up from week to week. I'll be talking about old Werner Herzog art house films, and then boom, transition right into Shaw Brothers martial arts films, because that's the kind of stuff I like. I like everything, and you got to have a little bit of variety.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Yeah, that's what's up, man. And thanks for coming through and hanging out with us, man. So if you aren't aware, we are continuing our dive in, for the month of October into the Stephen King adapted filmography, and today we've got a heavy hitter on this list. Today we're going to be talking about The Shining from 1980. This is a film directed by Stanley Kubric, and the plot goes as this. Jack Torrance becomes a writer caretaker at the isolated Overlook Hotel in Colorado, hoping to cure his writer's block. He settles in alone with his wife, Wendy, and his son, Danny, who is plagued by psychic premonitions. As Jack's writings goes nowhere and Danny's visions become more disturbing, Jack discovers the hotel's dark secrets and begins to unravel into a homicidal maniac hell-bent on terrorizing his family. And this cast is pretty crazy, man. Some heavy hitters here. We've got Jack Nicholson, plays Jack. Shelley Duvall plays Wendy, his wife. We've got Danny Lloyd, plays Danny Torrance. That's kind of weird when we get the cast and then
Jack is Jack, Danny's Danny. You know what I'm saying? They kept it real simple.
They couldn't rename Wendy to Shelley just to complete the trifecta, could they?
Yeah, or you just call Dick hollering, Scatman hollering. That would have worked.
All of us do anyway. So
yeah, we also get Louise Burns. And who else we got here? Leah Beldam, Joe Turkel. Lisa Burns, the other half of the twins, Philip Stone, Billy Gibson, Barry Nelson, Janice Sheldon, Allison Coleridge, Tony Burton also pops up in this. I forgot. That was crazy to see him. There's a bunch of other people that pop up in this thing. But I'm gonna go kick it to you first, El Goro. What's one thing that you like about this film?
I mean, can I just start off by saying everything? I mean, the fact that this is featured on Classics of Cinematics is only too appropriate because, in my opinion, this is one of the greatest horror films that has ever been made, directed by one of the greatest directors of all time. And it's the thing that I've had in conversation with people when I try to explain to them why I love Stanley Kubrick so much. Basically, anytime he jumped into a genre, somehow he managed to make one of the best examples of a movie in that genre. He jumped into science fiction with 2001, boom, one of the greatest science fiction films of all time. He jumped into Vietnam with Full Metal Jacket, boom, one of the best Vietnam movies of all time.
I love Full Metal.
Yes.
And then he decides that he's going to take a stab at horror in order to make something that's commercially accessible. And then, boom, he makes one of the greatest horror films of all time. From a performance standpoint, from the editing standpoint, from the wonderful music that was done by Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elkin, and just from the pure cinematography standpoint, the use of Steadicam to build that tension. It is an amazing, amazing film. That it's reached the point where so many people have talked about it that, there's a tendency of kind of a backlash and people say it's overrated, it's not all that. Man, to hell with that. It is all that. It is a classic for a reason, and I will forever go to bat for The Shining.
I hear that. Yeah, and to your point, the film has long-lasting imagery. There are things that you will see in this film once you watch it, you will not be able to unsee. Like, I still feel a certain tightness in my stomach when I see long hallways because of this. You know what I'm saying? And also, another thing that I like is the story development. This tension building that is created by the story development that takes us on this slow descent into madness. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we are watching, crazy happen on film in a way that it's never been seen before. You know what I mean? And I love that for me, and it's also it's a testament to the actors and the actresses that we have in this film. I mean, it's great acting, character development all the way through, but what Jack Nicholson does, the way he puts this film on his shoulders and then puts it in a torture rack is amazing.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. So one thing I'm interested in, because you said before we got going on this, Monk, this is a first time watch for you?
Yeah, this is a first time watch for me. I mean, I'm just familiar with it just from the like I said, from the pop culture standpoint, the Here's Johnny and some of the things in the movie that people, kind of, harp on or make fun of or, parody. And, sure. But I will say this, man, like the atmospherics of this thing are crazy. Like even as the film starts, we get the cinematic, the view of him, taking a trip up to the lodge for the interview, and the music that's on that, speaking on, talking about the music does a lot of the heavy lifting in some of these scenes and shots, especially here. It just lets you know that something's bad about to happen, man. You don't put music on this and it's going to be a nice sunny day, something. But even though, speaking on Bob talking about the build up, even that's kind of impressive. I think, I read that Stephen King, had some problems with the characterizations, but I think it works because we see Jack in this interview and he looks like a pretty decent guy for the most part. You're almost rooting for him, but then, that coming back up the road, with his wife and his kid, you're like, yo, something's a little off here, man. Just the way he's even kind of, the kid's like, I'm hungry. He's like, should have ate something this morning. And I'm like, damn, dude. Like,
ultimately annoyed by the presence of his family at all times. Like, it just, and this is before he gets, engulfed in overtaken by the elements of the hotel. It just seems like he's already fed up.
Yeah, but that's something cool. Like, it's cool seeing that because, like I said, like for me, I was talking about it. I think I texted him. It's like, man, Jack looked like he flipped real quick. But then I think that interview, portion of it serves to set us up. It sets us up because our guard is let down about him. But it seems like he's got real problems before he gets there. I mean, the alcoholism and all that, but it's also being amped up a little more by these supernatural elements once he gets to the hotel. Like, he's already flawed, but it's like you're giving this dude now you're putting him on crack or something.
Yeah,
like,
he was easy picking for the hotel. They were like, oh, we got one. We got one, coach.
And that was one of the big differences. I mean, there's many, many differences between the original King novel and the film. But one of the things that the novel definitely goes into is explaining that for the Jack Torrance character, this is really his last chance. They go deeper into his alcoholism. They mention the fact that he got fired from his teaching job because he beat up a kid. I mean, in addition to the dislocating Danny's arm. And there's from the jump, at least in the book, there's an adversarial relationship between Jack and the owners of the Overlook, the manager of the Overlook. There's like, man, we got this deadbeat. We're kind of forced as a favor to let him be the winter caretaker. But in the film, they shift that it feels like as soon as he lands in the Overlook, and when he's by himself, he's at home. He comments on that. It's like deja vu that he's been here before, and the people at the Overlook are welcoming him to it. But it's that when you find him with his family that, as you said, you pick up that little animosity that's there. Even just when he's commenting about, it's all right. He saw it on the television. And the eyes going like that. But and some people have commented that was an unfortunate thing, that the appeal of the original Jack in The Shining was the fact that he was a good guy that was turned bad. And then in the film with the casting of Jack Nicholson, there's never a question that he's going to go crazy because he starts out kind of crazy to begin with. But to me, I like that. I like the fact that we see that evolution of his madness. It's there from the jump, but it's simmering. There's a facade. He's tired of his family, but we still get to see the shift into full-on murderous rage up until the final point when he's chasing Danny through that hedge maze, and he's not even a man anymore. He can't even talk. He's just growling. He's become this full monster, and I like that arc. And I don't anybody who says that they kind of shot their shot too soon. I think they're really not giving this film credit for that evolution and the arc of Nicholson's performance.
Absolutely. And not for nothing, the book, like you said, it seems to focus more on like Jack descending into madness due to the alcoholism and over drinking. Whereas in the film, it's way more of a supernatural element. You know what I'm saying? Like they hit on that heavy, and, visually that's more appealing than sitting watching somebody get sauced and then act a fool. You know what I mean? I think that's where, Kubrick and Stephen King might have just had different visions of the story that was being told, and it works great because,
with a novel though, you've got 500 pages sometimes.
Yeah. Even more sometimes with a Stephen King book.
Yeah. So with this, 2.5 hours, you're trying to compact that, but still have it read in the right way. And I think it works, for the most part,
Definitely. Yeah. And the thing is you can feel, not only can you see, you can feel the frustration with Jack Nicholson. And I was looking at some notes. One of the things that Kubrick did to intensify this frustration, to really make it hit home for Jack Nicholson, for 2 weeks straight, they only fed him cheese sandwiches. And apparently he's not a fan of cheese sandwiches.
Man, I'm a fan of cheese, but I don't want to eat it for a cheese sandwich for nothing but 2 weeks.
And it doesn't even say they were grilled. So I don't know if they're cold.
They're probably just cold English cheese sandwiches with nothing on them.
Yeah. Oh, you don't like this? Here's another one. So and then I love it whenever he smiles. He has the most sinister smile that I've ever seen. You know what I mean? Like the way his eyebrows go up, and it was perfect for him to play the Joker in the first Batman role, because that smile is uncanny. But in this, it's like every time he starts smiling, he never looks happy. You know what I mean? And the way it just translates, on screen it's really, really awesome to see.
Agreed. And again, one of the things that I'm kind of picking up on with Stephen King, some of the issues he had with this adaptation, because that's something that always comes up whenever you talk about the movie The Shining. That inevitably it'll come up that Stephen King hated it. Now in subsequent years, he's backed off some of the hate. He just says, Stanley made a great movie. It's just not my book. And I think one of the biggest problems that he has with it is the Jack character in the film never has that moment that was in the novel where he was able to overcome the influence of the hotel in order to save his son. That at the end of the day, even though both of these characters are ultimately doomed, that the Jack in the book had a moment of self-sacrifice in order to protect his son. That he had these demons, both the ghost and his alcoholism, but he still deeply loved his child and never was willing to take that next step to actually kill him. Whereas
I got a theory on this. I feel like this Jack character kind of parallels Stephen's real life in a lot of ways.
1,000%.
Maybe he was upset because that aspect didn't get portrayed in the film that he wanted to come across.
That is exactly what it is. Stephen King, he writes what he knows, and he put a fair bit of himself into the Jack Torrance character, and this was years before he actually got sober. He still had a lot of drunken years ahead of him after he wrote The Shining. He pretty much said that he barely remembers writing Cujo because he was so drunk when he was doing it. Which, hey, props to him. I wish I was that talented when I was drunk.
And to your point, like I said, in this film, we never get a feeling that he ever cared for Danny. Even when he was asked about it, he was like, he was like, I would never, when the first time when he goes into the ballroom and he's talking to the bartender, I would never hurt a hair on his head. Okay, well, there was the one time. I just had a minor bit of, over muscle, but then he even refers to him, he said, I love the little son of a bitch. So he shows that he's still even taking pot shots at his wife, and he doesn't really care for Danny. You know what I'm saying? Danny is an annoyance, and the wife is even more of an annoyance to him, because it's almost like he begrudges them for his downfalls. It's their fault that he is the way he is, because he's taking no accountability for what he does. But also, I love what we get from Danny in this. The actor, I think, for that young man to be so young and to captivate and the audience the way he does, and to give us the role that he does, pretty much portraying two individuals, because it's not just Danny. We also get the whole little thing with Tony going on, with him kind of, subsequently being possessed before they even go to the hotel. You know what I'm saying? And doing the little thing with the finger and the choice or the voice changes. But then it's what he does with his face too. I was watching this with my daughter last night. And she pointed out, she was like, you notice how every time he speaks as Tony, his eyes, like he goes blank, like he looks away, like he's now disengaged with his audience, whomever he's talking to, which most of the time is his mom. But you know what I'm saying? I thought that was really, really cool for him to be such a young actor at that time and to be able to portray that so well.
Yeah, I mean, he was all of like 8 years old when they shot this movie, maybe 7 on that, but. And the fact that he was able to do that with the way that Stanley Kubrick made movies. Because infamously, Kubrick loved doing take after take after take after take. I mean, sometimes like 80 takes. And in fairness, it's been pointed out, some of the reason that there's so many takes is because he didn't do rehearsals. He shot rehearsals. So it would just be, instead of running it through without the camera running, you just like, all right, we're going to rehearse this, but we're going to call this take 1. But he also liked the fact that he could take his time with making the movies and see where the performance would sort of evolve. But the necessary part of that is it's very draining on an actor to deliver the same sort of performance 80 times in some cases.
Some of these were over 100 with some of these things. When I look it up.
And what was funny is that, the scene between Danny and Scatman, where they're talking about The Shining, that at one point Scatman was apparently breaking down and just like, man, Stanley, I can't do it anymore. But Danny Lloyd was like in the pocket. He was willing to keep going. And I saw it on the making of it. One of the gentlemen involved in the production said something to the effect of, "That's why I didn't feel like child abuse because Danny Lloyd was he was down for it."
You outlasted the Scatman.
Yeah. Now Shelley Duvall, on the other hand, had a goddamn breakdown.
Yes, lost her hair and everything.
Yep, because and that's one of the other things that keep coming in.
After like 30, 40, like, look, dog, you don't have to figure it out. I'm not doing this no more.
With that kind of like applied pressure that Kubrick was putting on, whether it was obviously it was willingly and he knew what he was doing, it was creating these improvisations from the actors and actresses. Like there was this the one
maybe
scene,
it wasn't even improvisation. Maybe like this is all I got left, dude.
And that's the thing people talked about. That
you have to do something extra, like one scene in the script where Jack Nicholson was just supposed to be sitting around doing nothing and showing, like he's always talking about, I got all this work, I got all this stuff to do. But that scene where he's just throwing the tennis ball against the wall. Originally in the script, he was not. That was something Jack Nicholson decided to do on the fly, just because of all these multiple takes. He was just supposed to be shown sitting doing nothing, feeling like he was doing everything.
I feel like eventually I would have sat down and did nothing. Like, that's it, dog. That's all you're gonna get out of me. I don't care. Kubrick, Spielberg. I don't care who you are. This is crazy.
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of the relationship eventually that he landed with Shelley Duvall, between Kubrick and Duvall, that he wanted her performance to be on the end of her rope. And rightly or wrongly, the way he got that out of Shelley Duvall was to basically psychologically torment her until she got to the end of her rope for real. And that's what we're seeing on screen. Now, there's a lot to talking about that. Shelley Duvall in various interviews has gone on to say, I appreciate that. I would never do that again, but it was a good experience in retrospect at the time. But then there's also that thought of, is it moral to essentially torture your actor in order to get a kind of performance out of them? And that's something you got to kind of make up your own mind one way or the other. I mean, I'm of the opinion that this is Shelley Duvall's finest performance, but I also know what went into it. That at a certain point, it's not acting anymore; it's just somebody having a breakdown on screen.
Wait. So let me get this right. You prefer this performance over her being olive oil in the Popeye film?
I got a lot of love for Popeye, don't get me wrong. But I'm going to go with Wendy at any time over olive oil.
Well, I mean, it is interesting. It makes me even wonder, like would something like that be allowed today with today's film?
I think it just depends on how willing the actor's able to do it. Because I know some actors do want to kind of be put in that position. They want to basically be pushed out of their comfort zone. And at that point, there's no real antagonism and that sort of thing. They signed up for it. They want to be pushed. They want to have that sort of method in the pocket. I'm feeling this with everything. But yeah, the day of kind of the dictatorial director who could get away with that, whether it be Kubrick or whether it be some of the stuff that Hitchcock pulled over the years, I don't think we would experience that too much these days.
Yeah. I mean, because sometimes when these actresses really go, do great lengths to embody their roles on personal levels, it already has a negative effect. I mean, look at Heath Ledger with the Joker role. I mean, that was one of the best Joker roles ever. But I mean, that ultimately is also what kind of, from what they say, pushed him over the edge. So I mean, it's one thing. I mean, these actors and these actresses, they, there's no telling what they do on a personal level to fully engulf in these roles that they're taking on. But then when you have somebody else behind you pushing you even further, sometimes, I mean, it might be too much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, and then it gets to the question: is it moral? Because at the end of the day, she went through a hell of a lot of trauma, but it ended up being in an amazing film, and the one that will outlive all of us. But that question, is it a moral thing? And I think that's just something everybody's going to have to decide for themselves.
Yeah. There was a thing too that I saw with the making of this. One of the camera operators actually loved it. He's like, "Well, dang, I'm getting to perfect my movements. I'm, my camera stuff because I'm doing all these takes."
Oh, that's repetition, yeah.
I mean, you're lugging the camera around. I think that's a little different than taking yourself to these crazy emotional highs every.
I bet you the cameraman didn't have to eat cheese sandwiches.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, the guy who actually invented the Steadicam, the rig that allows you to move around and it's smooth, and The Shining, one of the finest example of it. The guy who invented it was by the name of Garrett Brown, and he was involved in the production of this. And he loved the fact that he had this space to show off this technique, that he had innovated this way of shooting, and that The Shining was really his first opportunity to just go with it. And then stuff like, following Danny when he's on the tricycle or going through the maze. And it's one of the things they pointed out again in a special feature on this. In the final sequence in the snow maze, there was really no other way they could have shot that than other with the Steadicam, because if they didn't lay down track, because it would have shown up on the screen, they couldn't do it. They had to maintain those footprints. So doing it with the Steadicam, it not only gives you this sort of otherworldly approach, but it also is technically the only way you could have pulled off these shots. And again, we're used to Steadicam. Steadicam's something that exists in all. But this, I could just imagine what it would have been like seeing this back in 1980. And, movies were not shot like this.
Yeah, like even just like panning left to right was complicated. Like I just watched, I got this thing on in the background. I'm just watching the scene where Wendy's bringing him the breakfast in bed tray. And, the Steadicam is following her walking through the hall. And it just hit me that, like you said, this wasn't common in filmmaking at the time, so that's an aspect that, this film is changing, how films are being made.
And the way why this film still holds up now, because these movements and these angles that we're getting, this is something that we're used to seeing now with like what they would do with like the drones or something like this constant circular motion, or like you said, the following of people are these long, wide angles and everything.
The drones are getting crazy right now. What was that movie? The one on Netflix we were talking about with the Asian.
Carter.
Oh man, it's out of control. But it's amazing to see it happening. But so one aspect that I did like about this is the hotel itself, man. It's character in its own, and and I forgot what this place, the actual real place is. Apparently, it's a real popular destination since this film came out. Actually made a maze on the property to mimic the maze in the movie. But what's really cool to me is, I like the walkthrough that we get in the film that's showing everything. But then once that crew leaves, man, this place takes on another life, man. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I used to have an office job like years ago. And on some Saturdays, I had to go in, it was giving me overtime and doing extra. they work, but I'd be the only one in there, man. And I know nothing really could happen to me in there, but something about that space and like a space that was full of people usually. Now it's just me in there, and dude, there were moments I would get in there and I would just freak out for a few seconds, like, yo, what? Like, and I know nothing's going on, but something about that vastness of space and the emptiness of it was just fearful at times to me, man. Like,
also, what gives this hotel life is the color palettes that they choose. I mean, this design that they have on the carpeting. You notice, and there is a lot of red, which you know that is like symbolism for a lot of the spirit entities and things like that in a lot of horror films. The way that bathroom looked when he's talking with the butler, I mean, I've never seen a bathroom with that much red in it ever.
Sure, yeah.
I was like, whoa, it's almost like when he walked in there to talk to him, it was almost like he was having a one-on-one conversation with Satan himself.
Almost, yeah. And just the fact that, all of the interiors, they were all sets, that this was something that they built completely in the studio. They had the exterior stuff that was done in Oregon at the Timberline Lodge, but all of this stuff was just stuff they built. And it was the thing where Stanley would just had photographers go out and shoot a bunch of different hotels. And then he'd be like, okay, I want that room. I want this kind of vibe for this lobby. Yeah. We're just going to take what exists in the real world and kind of piece it together like a puzzle. And that's one of the fun things also, that when you start sort of breaking down like the geography of the Overlook, parts of it don't make sense. For example, when he's walking to the office of Ullman's office, and you follow the shot, if you look carefully, you can see people going behind his office. So it's like there's a hallway supposed to be behind his office, but when you get into his office, there's a window behind him that looks outside. So the geography of the place doesn't make sense. And whether that was an intentional thing that they wanted to kind of make it seem otherworldly, a subliminal, your mind going, wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Or if it's just something that they didn't care about. It's like, nobody's going to notice. We just like the way it looks.
Yeah. Well, and also I think it was really cool that, not only are we trying to diagnose and digest the elements that we are given, but then they also create this lore, like, there are rooms within the rooms. Like we all still don't know what really happened in room 237, but everyone's supposed to stay far away from that. And then we get a brief glimpse. When Danny goes in there, we don't know what happens. Of course, he's shell shocked after that. And then when Jack goes in there, we see what happens as far as with the woman and everything. But I have a feeling like this is kind of like
maybe
that film.
37 is like the where the core of this supernatural entity is
like in that film 1408, like you know what I'm saying?
Another Stephen King book.
Another Stephen King book, yes, indeed. And I feel like like this could have, if they really wanted to dive really deep into this film, they could have then recreated a whole nother film just based off that room alone, which makes it that much more appealing to us as viewers, because they open, they pretty much scratch the scab off of a wound and then just leave it open.
Yep. And that's the whole way that Kubrick works in this film. There's a lot of ambiguity. I mean, there's still some people out there that go with the theory that there is no ghostly happenings in this hotel at all, that this is all in Jack's mind, that he is completely insane. And I don't hold with that, because there's one scene in particular that is impossible unless there's ghosts happening, and that's when he's locked in the freezer, because how the hell is he going to get out?
Yep.
Exactly. There. But also, you think about the scene with the bar, like there's no alcohol in here, but suddenly he's drunk. So that's telling me that the supernatural presence that's going on there is real. At least
and he's having a full-on conversation. The bar's empty. You see when Wendy comes in there, and also to both y'all's point, Wendy starts to go crazy at the end. She sees it. The hotel starts, it almost uncloaks itself, and she starts seeing all kinds of crazy elements. Even the one part with the scene with the dude and the
bear suit.
I was like, what the hell does that have to do with anything?
That might be the first time in film history that we've seen furries depicted.
It's true.
I was looking at it, I was like, of everything else that was going on, like that was one of the harder things for me to process. I was like, well
Stanley was in the head of the curve.
And with so much kind of what the hell, and the fact that it doesn't provide explanations as to this. There's been so many different theories that have arisen out of this film. And there's an entire documentary, I don't know if you've seen it, called Room 237.
The IFC film, yes. Yep.
So where it goes down to all of the different theories that people have about this movie, down to the fact that some people think it was a coded confession that Stanley Kubrick was involved in staging the moon landings.
Yeah, that's wild to me.
They hired him to stage the moon landing, and The Shining was his subtle way of admitting that he was actually involved in it. Yeah. I don't truck with half these theories. I think most of them, when you start digging into the surface, they don't hold up, especially since a lot of them take views of Stanley Kubrick. Because he was something of a perfectionist, they believe that any sort of inconsistency in the film must be deliberate.
It's on purpose.
When really, he's just making a movie, and sometimes you miss things. Yes, you could do 80 takes, but if you're looking at the same thing over and over again, you may not notice that something's out of place. Not everything is a hidden message.
And that's a problem, though, if you're taking time to make 80 takes. Like that's the thing, too, I was meant to mention earlier. Most films don't have the time to take 80 takes. That's going to be imagine an Avengers taking 80 takes. Nah, bro. We
no way.
Shooting crazy budget. Like, we don't have the money to do 80 takes.
The directors aren't going to be given the liberties to take the time to take 80 takes.
There's not going to be money left to do the special effects as we take 80 takes.
So yeah, I mean,
it's in a different space.
That's part of the fun with The Shining. That on one level, it's just a really solid horror film. But then there's all these different ways you can engage with it. From a strictly filmmaking standpoint, you can appreciate the craft that went into it. The crazy people that come up with all of these different theories about what it is. You can dive down that rabbit hole if you really want to get into it. Performance-wise, all of these different things are just kind of wrapped up in this notion of The Shining. And that's part of the reason why it continues to have the impact that it does. That, it exists in sort of a pop cultural standpoint, but I think it also just works as a film. And people, when they get a chance to see it, it affects them on some level. It may not become their favorite, but I think it's undeniable that it is an amazing movie.
Well, this is by far, this is pretty much the blueprint, by far one of the best psychological thrillers ever. You know what I'm saying? Ever. But one thing that I also like is that it is it is held so high, so well renowned as a horror film, and the body count is like next to nothing in this.
Yeah, there's one guy. Unfortunately, it's Scatman. But
one guy. Unfortunately, it's Scatman. Yes, but I'm saying. Whereas now, you got your Saw films. It's more about let's stack bodies up, from here to the top of the house, and all blood, guts, gore, this, that, whatever. This film didn't need that. It dove so deep into the mind, and then had you as a viewer dive into your own self, and we all digest what we're seeing differently. You know what I'm saying? This film it does it on a visual aspect without having to, pull off any low hanging fruit in a sense. It's way deeper than that. And I think that is why this film is so renowned, justifiably so, because of the approach, the way that it did things just differently. You know what I'm saying? For this to be, pretty much, Jack Nicholson turns into a cold cut killer.
Sure.
You only caught one body.
Yeah,
that's it. But I think the danger though is just knowing, like I think they do a good job of that. Once we see the lore, like during the interview when the manager tells them there are some things that happen in here, and you're just like, oh, that's it. And then I love the scene where Danny's riding through the hallway, and we actually see the bodies of this previous guy, this previous manager who basically is doing what Jack is eventually going to try to do, basically killed his family and then killed himself. And you just see those little bodies laying there. You're like, wow, it's crazy, man. Because a lot of times it's one thing to hear about these things in our imaginations. They make a little placeholder for it, but then to actually see it, that adds just an extra element to it. And then you're wondering, because you just see the aftermath. You're like, yo, what was going on with this guy? Because I thought that scene was interesting too, where he's clearly talking to the guy that flipped out previously.
Yeah.
And that guy's, trying to flip, get him
flip it on
ready.
Him. You've always been
it's talking about the scat man, he drops the N-word on him and all that craziness. But then you're like, wow, like it's a pattern. It almost seems like it makes me wonder, so who was the guy that talked to this guy before he flipped out? Like this is the thing, like the the interviewer, he's talking about this one incident, but I got a feeling, man, this place has had an incident, multiple, like every few years they get an incident.
It's built on an ancient Indian burial ground, and they had to repel attacks. So it's built as an expression of basically the genocide of a people. So Native Americans had this space where they buried their dead, and then these people came in, white folks came in, and basically said, "No, we're just going to clear it all out. Oh, you don't like us coming or messing up the fact that this is where you buried your bodies? We're going to kill you too." And the fact that the Native American motifs are all part of the makeup of the hotel, that is one thing that again, there's a lot of theories about this, but one I do believe it was intentional, that Stanley Kubrick has expressed over his career an interest in sort of Holocaust narratives. For the longest time, he wanted to make a film about the Holocaust, but then Steven Spielberg made Schindler's List, and he was like, okay, I can't top that. So he's had an interest in the notion of genocide. He's had an interest in the notion of that sort of generational atrocity. And then basically he includes that into the very marrow of the Overlook. There's a lot of terrible things that have happened, but the land that it was built on is a land soaked in blood. So it just passes on, as you say, from one generation to the next. The atrocities pass on, the racism passes on, and it shows at the end that Jack is part of the hotel. Now, whether he's always been in that photo, or if it's something that came in later, that's the kind of the ambiguity.
That was a weird angle. I really definitely did love that because we don't know. We don't know. Sitting there like
we know that it was a significant time warp, because this film was taking place 50, 60 years later, and in that photo it was July 4th, 1921. And that's another cool thing. I'm glad you brought it up with the hotel being built on the Native American burial ground, because the only other film that we got that is also a very notable ghostly element film, which is the Poltergeist. And they did the same thing, but that also shows us, I also feel like watching this film, it's even though everything subsequently happens, on this 5-month layover where no one else is in the hotel, that's when, the hotel really, takes control over its supernatural elements and whoever's in there. I don't think it takes any days off. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that it's still running full circle all year round, because like you were saying, Cor, when the manager is telling him about this previous incident that took place, he's so casual about it. He's like, oh yeah, so I just figured, I'd let you know. And then you even see like Jack is unfazed. He's like, oh, I see why my folks in Denver saved this part for you to tell me. And he was like, well, how do you think your wife's going to take it? He's like, oh, she loves horror films. She loves horror books, so she'll be all right. And then he smiles almost as if like Allman just told him a joke.
It makes me wonder, though. I wonder if the hotel's influence is bearing on him in that moment, or if he's just naturally like that.
I think it starts right
when and one of the things that they mention, and it's not a thing you notice right away, but then you think about it. Dick, when he's talking to Danny, and he's talking about The Shining and how it gets passed down. His grandmother had it, and then he had it. The only people who see the ghosts and experience that are Scatman, Danny, but also Jack. So the theory is that Jack himself had The Shining. That's why the hotel was able to get into him. Now, he wasn't as powerful as Danny, and wasn't as powerful as Scatman. So you get the sense that they could have, that's why Scatman was able to, work in the hotel without losing his mind. Yeah. The Shining was strong enough, and he knew what he was seeing. It's like, okay, this isn't real. It's just pictures. But Jack doesn't have that sort of control. And so that gave the hotel an in, a way to start manipulating him.
And also, maybe Jack didn't have that control because he was engulfed in his alcoholism. Sure. You feel what I'm saying? Maybe he wasn't seeing the world with a clear eye anyway.
He's already kind of broken in a way, so that allowed an opening for the Shining to
that's what they say. I mean, when it comes to like these possession movies or things like that, they take broken hosts.
Yeah, and that's something that King would explore in the sequel that he did for The Shining of Dr. Sleep. Yeah. Where they were introduced to Danny as an adult, and he becomes an alcoholic as well, because he's living with the trauma and also living with the weight of having The Shining and seeing some
I
terrible.
do not blame him at all.
No, not at all. No. Ask me more. Yeah, he was like, man, I was sipping red rum when I was 7. Now I need some Bacardi rum. Now I'm an adult.
That's where it gets into some interesting stuff, because also in the book they explore who Tony actually is. And it turns out that it's actually Danny from the future who's psychically projecting himself back into the past in order to protect himself in the past.
That's crazy. I haven't watched Dr. Sleep. I got to watch that, man.
So Danny was possessed by his future self.
That was something that was in the original King book of The Shining.
Yeah.
So that was a thing that didn't need to be in the movie, but still, it's an interesting touch. I mean, we don't need to know where Tony comes from. We don't need to know a lot of these explanations and a lot of the background of the Overlook. It works without that, but it's there if people want to dig in.
Yeah, and another thing too is it's funny how in the novel the boiler room was such a heavy aspect in the novel.
Yeah,
they only mention it one time in the book or in the film, and it doesn't even show Jack go into the boiler room. It was actually Wendy in the boiler room.
Well, that's the thing in the movie. Wendy's the only one doing any work on this hotel. She's the only one maintaining the hotel. Wendy, Jack is just kind of doing his thing.
And Jack just keeps talking about how busy he is. Oh, I got so much work to do. I'm like, dog, you're either sleeping or writing the same sentence a billion trillion times.
It's crazy to me too that he chose to write in the biggest room in the place. Like it's not like he took an office or this is the room I'm going to go into, which is usually. Even, reading Stephen King's own writing, he actually recommends a smaller writing room, a more cozy space. And this guy picks like a hall. He sits in the middle of a theater.
Dude, just imagine the echo on that old school typewriter. This ain't no computer keyboard. That would drive you insane.
Big satisfying. Punch the keys. Typewriter.
I do like Jack Nicholson's performance here, man. It's crazy. It's over the top, but it conveys what we're supposed to feel from this character as he dips into that madness. Because later toward the end, man, it gets to a point where his normal speech is just even off, man. It just seems like he's trying to say the simplest things, but it's wrapped in all these little, catchphrases and just the mannerisms, the tics. It's almost like someone else is in his body and is not familiar with it, but it's still, navigating and making him say things and making him move. And it's just a weird, like on the physical level, it's crazy.
Those impulsive, like twitches and then him punching in the air and doing all this crazy stuff. It's like, man, like one of the most gratifying parts for me in this film was when Wendy finally sees that he is like full on crazy. She looks at all the stuff he's been writing, and then when he's like slowly stalking her up the stairs, and she's like, you see, she don't want to hurt him, but she's like, man, you keep coming. And then when she hits him in the hand, he's like, oh, and then she Louisville's him in the head. Take that, you know what I'm saying? Leave her alone.
Up to that stuntman for taking that fall. I mean, stuntmen have often said the first things you could do is fall downstairs, but guy, he took it hard.
He did. I'm sure he did.
I'm sure Stanley Kubrick made him do it 80 times.
80 times. That's what I'm saying. Hey, you're going to earn your check, stuntman.
I hope not, man. There are some scenes of like, the scat man have to take that axe to the chest 80 times. There's no way they're going to reset that over and over.
Yeah.
They're just going to have to
take the thing is, people have commented about, the death of Scatman in that and how that's part of the broader criticism that can be leveled against horror films of the black man always dies. Sometimes they say he always dies first. Doesn't always die first, but there seems to be a trend of them dying often, which is the problem. And that is legit criticism. It also kind of fits into the notion of what's the term? The magical Negro, they say, where it's he's
the one that figured it out.
This only to help white people. And Scatman's character kind of fits into that as well. But I like the twist of it. Because they set all this time setting up that he is coming to the rescue. He leaves Florida. He was fine in Florida. He was chilling out in his house. He's got a naked lady on the wall behind him.
One of the coolest old school pictures ever. Yeah.
And then we follow him for so long, setting up his flight, calling up Tony Burton to get a snowcat, making his way there, finally arriving. It's like, okay, he's gonna save Danny, and then boom. dead.
Instantly. And Jack didn't even like shoot the fair one with him. He jumped from behind the corner. Yep. You know, he didn't even give him a fair chance. Like say, hey, I'm gonna fight you now. I'm gonna hit you with this axe. That man never saw it coming. That was terrible.
It was such a twist because the audience is expecting a certain thing. They're expecting this sort of arc, and it's
to me, it's a slower version of Sam Jackson's speech in Deep Blue Sea.
Oh, yeah.
It's like a slower version.
The guy that dies multiple times in horror. He got it in Deep Blue Sea. He got it in Jurassic Park. There was a time that Sam Jackson was just the man who was killed by some sort of monster.
But see, some of these tropes become a thing. Like they reproduce this scene in Barbarian too, where you think something's going to like somebody's giving a speech and all of a sudden it's like wham. But speaking on to the Scatman thing, the black man died, and it's to the point now where it's such a trope now. Like I was thinking, I'm writing the script in the. I keep faking. I got to finish this thing, but I think I'm going to kill a black man first just to do it, just because it's like it's almost a trope. It's so tropey now. It's like let's lean into it, man. This guy's gotta die first. But it's wild to me, man. I'm not mad at it. It's just how some of these things played out. But also, I want to point out there are films, in this era and before that totally define that. I mean, there's an adaptation of what is it? I think Journey to the Center of the Earth. Mm-hmm. One of those, I forgot which is the one where the it's like a ship crew, they get lost, and they actually run into the Captain Nemo's ship under the but there's a movie, Mysterious Island. Okay, that's a crazy, great Ray Harryhausen stop motion stuff in there. But there's a black dude in there, and I remember the first time I watched that movie, and the part that blew me away, like it's a great movie, but one of the parts that blew me away the most was a black crew member, and he makes it through the whole movie. And there's a bunch of guys that died, but so it's like.
And not for nothing, to your point, Goro, the thing I liked about this, I mean, even though, yes, it's tropey and this is something that we've got accustomed to seeing in these older films, but the way that this one was done, like you said, the build up to Scatman about to almost being able to save the day, and then just being off so quickly, it's a joy snatcher. You know what I'm saying? What he did is in one swift swipe of the axe, all hope is lost. Because now, you know what I'm saying, we don't know what's going to happen with the family. Because, Jack is, by this point, he's fully all the way overtaken.
Yeah, and Wendy's not physically enough to really beat him that way.
Yeah, she's not going to be able to do that. And Danny's about, she might come up to Jack's knee. So what's he going to do? And Tony ain't doing nothing except for talking. So what are we going to do? So I think that's where, as a viewer, you kind of feel like there is no hope no more. Now it is really just, a Royal Rumble. Everyone's there for themselves. You know what I'm saying? Well, Wendy and Danny, of course, that they're locked in, but it seems like Jack, by that point, after he took Scatman out, he reshifted his focus. He didn't even care about Wendy no more. He just wanted the 86 Jack.
Yeah. Yep.
Not Jack, Danny.
But at that point, too, I feel like at this point, the tension is ratcheted up so much. After Scatman dies, it's like, you're just sitting there like,
well, because he takes the
I don't know how this is going to end, and it's so funny because, ultimately, we get to chase through the maze, which I thought was a great shot too. Seeing that play out because at first I thought those little plaques in the maze when we seen in the daytime, I thought they had like little history facts on them or whatever, but then I found out they were lights. Mm-hmm. So that looked really cool as they're running through. Danny's trying to hide. And then there's a funny part where he's stepping. I was like, what's wrong with this kid? And then I realized, he's stepping back into his tracks.
Yes, and then he had the wherewithal to wipe away his tracks and to hide in the bush and everything.
Lead him.
It's just, as I'm saying, this kid was wise beyond his years, man.
Yeah. But then the part that gets me is like, I've been seeing this meme for years and I did not know what it was about. But, eventually they get out of the maze before Jack does, get on the snowcat and roll out of there. And we see him the next day just frozen. And I'm like, oh my God. And like, this is where that came from.
Yeah,
I'm finally hearing
that last shot,
Yes. And that weird, his face, he still almost looked like he's smiling. Like he's still like he's happy with his efforts and his energy towards what he did. Which
is crazy too, because if you died from exposure, you're probably going to effectively your eyes going to close, man. You're not going to die with your eyes wide open like that. That's crazy.
Or sitting like just sitting there, like I mean, you would try to cuddle up or something.
But that show makes me feel like the possession was
exactly. Well, he's locked into that forever. And then eventually, and then again, we get that last shot where that slow push in on that photo, and then we see him again back in 1921 that the hotel has absorbed him. That's always been my interpretation. I've seen that photo ahead of time. He wouldn't have been in it, but when he dies, he becomes part of the hotel. He becomes yet one of those ghosts.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think in the original version, the hotel is destroyed in a fire.
The boiler.
Because he wasn't tending to them. Yeah.
So I got a feeling like whoever comes along next to be the next manager during this break, his ghost will probably be dealing with them. Yeah, he'll be in there.
And they kind of allude on that when he's having the conversation with the previous caretaker, the butler in the bathroom, when he was like, "Yo, you were the caretaker," and he was like, "No, Jack, you've always been the caretaker." Which that's them kind of alluding to. They pull these people in, and the caretaker is that's how they get you in. Like that's pretty much the worm on the hook. Then they reel you in, and then once you give into the hotel, then you become part of it, and then on to the next one. You know what I'm saying? It's pretty much just collecting bodies and souls as it continues to stand. You know what I mean?
Oh, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, man. I don't know. Anything else you want to bring up with it? Anything else you like about this?
Dives you can go into on this movie, just the various aspects of it. But the only thing I can say is, again, it's a classic for a reason. And it's one of those where some films just kind of coast off reputation, and that can get a resultant backlash against it. If a film gets propped up, there's always going to be some cantankerous jerk out there that wants to tear it back down. And I see that from time to time with The Shining. And hey, if you don't like it, you don't like it. Films are the most subjective kind of art out there. And what works for some is not going to work for others. For me, this is one of my favorite horror films. It kind of goes into a rotating when somebody says, "What's your favorite horror film of all time?" It's like, well, I can give you like a top 5, and the things are going to shift around depending on how I'm feeling. But always somewhere up near the top is going to be something like The Exorcist and, of course, The Shining. I mean, Kubrick is one of my absolute favorite directors, and when he decided to take a stab at my favorite genre, he did such an amazing job. And yeah, there's a reason that I continue to love this film. I've seen it so many times, and I'm super glad that you got the opportunity to finally watch it, Monk. And I hope that this will become a favorite of yours somewhere down the line.
Yeah, I feel like this definitely is one that's going to reward repeated, viewings. Because like one of the aspects, because it's different seeing it, so late in life. Because sometimes, with some of these other films that we talk about on here, it's like I still got that childhood wonder and fascination to it, but I feel like this one, definitely earns its reputation, man. Once you peel back some of the layers and see what's going on, because this is one of the ones that, it looks pretty straightforward, watching it from beginning to end, but I feel like repeated viewers are going to, help me peel back some of the layers and look at, like, even just mentioning the Steadicam stuff. It's like, they weren't shooting Steadicam back in it, so that's, even that, those aspects will reward, repeated viewings and start stripping away and looking at what Kubrick, the Kubrickness that he brought to this, production.
And just into your point, I mean, this film is so layered. Like, my first viewing, I was substantially younger than I am now, and watching it with those younger eyes, I took it in a certain light, and then every time I've seen it since, it hits me different. Every time it hit me different watching it this time, getting ready for the show, and then it hit me even harder when I watched it with my daughter. She never saw it before. She was like, "Whoa, this is just insane." And like I said, there's not a lot of horror films that will really, dig deep into the psyche the way that this one does. This one, it makes you think afterwards. It makes like I said, there are things going on with the imagery that you just will not be able to unsee after watching this film. And every time you watch it, it's gonna hit you a different way, and that's what great filmmaking is. It's like, no matter how many times you see it, it still feels like watching it for the first time, it's a great feeling, you know what I'm saying? And that's why, you know, I love this film, and it stays in heavy rotation for me as well.
Yeah. And as I always say to people, because, you know, this is the whole reason for this, is these are Stephen King adaptations. In terms of an adaptation of the book, it absolutely fails. It completely goes in its own direction. It does not hit the same sort of thematics that King wanted to explore in this film. It plays it very fast, very loose. So it's not a very good Stephen King adaptation, but it's a damn fine film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good way we can end it on that note, man. So, Goro, tell the folks how they can find you and Talk Without Reason.
Without reason sometime too, man. I do a weekly movie discussion podcast called Talk Without Rhythm. Every week I select 2 films, or some of my frequently my patrons will select the films for me. The general thing is I try to find some sort of common ground between them, a theme for the double feature, and I talk about just about anything, any sort of genre, any sort of era. I'm all about it. Now, at the time that this will be going out, I'll be getting ready to do my 31 Days of Halloween, which means in addition to the weekly podcast that I'm doing throughout the month of October, every day in the month of October, I watch a horror film that I have never seen and then record a brief podcast about it. So 31 days, 31 horror films, 31 podcasts. And that's a daily schedule. It's the 13th time that I've done this on the show. It's always a hell of a lot of fun. I love diving into the corners of the horror genre that I've never explored before. As a fan of the genre, you just got to keep exploring, keep digging. And that's why I love doing 31 days. So there's going to be a lot of fun films going back all the way to the 1920s. I found a Japanese silent film that I've never seen before. So that's going to be fun to explore that, all the way up to films that came out just last year. And then in addition to that, to the weekly episodes of the podcast, because this is the 13th Halloween or month of October that I've done on the show, I've decided to finally discuss all of the Friday the 13th films that I haven't done previously on it. So part 1, part 2, part 3 is going to be on there. I think I've already done part 4, so it's going to be all over the place. But it should be a lot. Are you going
to do Jason Takes Manhattan?
Yep, that's going to be on there because I haven't discussed it yet. Let's see what's going to be. First episode is going to be 1 and 2. Second is going to be 3 and 7 because I've done 4, 5, and 6 before. Then it's going to be Jason Takes Manhattan and Jason Goes to Hell. Then it's going to be Jason X and then the remake. And then the last one released right before Halloween are going to be 2 Jason fan films that I've heard really good things about. Never Hike Alone from 2017 and 2020's Never Hike Alone in the Snow. So it's going to be a lot of Jason on that month.
Nice. That's what's up, folks, man. And this is Monk. You can catch me at Monkey Blood on Twitter, Instagram. Follow Classes of Cinematics at Classes of Cinematics on Instagram.
This is Bobby Blockbuster. You can catch me on Instagram at Bobby Blockbuster 18.
Yeah, folks, and we're gonna be back with more Stephen King and more spooky stuff, for this season, man. And thanks again for coming and hang out with us, El Goro.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was absolutely a blast.